모두 계제된 바 담제제 마든 바보 소나요 담제제 되게 지금 담달로 다바노 자자베게 기ven이 손에 저제 주도도다 저저바 저저 줄로도달로 돌려도라랑도 라바다라도 쯤도 봐요 뒤지 gembil라요 저항서로 돌려자자달라다 바바메라 저저가 뭐 바바도 바자반 공바 가지로만 넘어서 네 오늘 주제 이제 보람이라도 사실 그냥 라선 저강 어떤 동대표 더블 넘어져라서 네 소통 넘어져라 추진지 야송에 보고 저 말이야 선제 동대표도 다 지나 담바 주제는 더더서 네 되는 다 주로 남발라들 와 도리제 바가 거가 들은 거 보시라래 옛날에 고대의 그 탐지라서 항상 섬이요 들이 때문에 다 상하지 들이 오하도리데 상하 탑탑발에 오마호도리데 봐서 들이 상하지 봐도 강이나들이 다 배나 강사지가 르르 차잖아 르디 세리 마당 마버도 반나도 보지 난지 상화도 셈리 들이 상화 셈리 셈기도 지금 뭐니 이다가 주력 탐지기단에 따와지 받으래 따와지 가면 되네 네 구독 주거든 콜리니 요래지 동남은 우리 콜리니 요 말이지 강을 콜리니 예미 이제들 찍는 보소 상황이 되는 콜리니 매발에 차단한 거 까미더니 석고도 콜리니 요래 내독니 요래 그것도 다 무슨 하나 송반하게 대변에 들이다 오하도리 대바데 상하가 타타바리.
So today, my Dharma friends, I will give an introduction to the practice of the Om Ahung Vajra recitation. And so in general, all the phenomena of samsara and nirvana have an outer, inner, and a secret aspect. And within the secret mantra or the Vajrayana, the Om Ahung Vajra recitation is actually the ultimate meaning of secret mantra. So how can we understand that? If we, for example, think about a person's body is the person's outer aspect. Then the person's speech and the various thoughts in the person's mind are the person's inner aspect. And the person's mind itself is the secret aspect. And that is the mind that is free of any thoughts at all. So in the various religions, there is a view. And so how can we understand the view? On the relative level, there is the duality of samsara and nirvana. But on the ultimate level, samsara and nirvana do not exist. Samsara and nirvana are indivisible on the single basis, Buddha nature. So secretly, the secret aspect of the view is that samsara and nirvana do not exist as a duality. So on the outer level, on the outer, inner, and relative level, there is this duality of samsara and nirvana, happiness and suffering, according to the teachings in the Samantabhadra prayer. And so of these, the secret mantra, the Om Ahung Vajra recitation is a practice that belongs to the ultimate aspect of secret mantra.
파츠 기록 파츠 뒤다는 거고 요리 양섬 쪽어지네 들이 내동 며칠 담들 이제 뭐 주지 그다는 이제 고와들을 들이 같이 들이랑 같이 마찬지 자가지 기바타면 돼 이제 뭐 주지 놀는 이가들이 대화도 탑당들이 동네 탑 뭐요 직바이 말이 들이 데려자들이 이제 뭐 줄었더니 들이 동네 탑 잡아니 요 말이 강의 있더니 다딘 달라티는 고와토고 신 대식이 뭐지 상계 인장 내가 다딘 단전에 되는 뭐 뭐지 이때 레사는 저들이 조금은 차범주들이 동해를 타고 갑니베 이 대라티네 다 담이 철로 같이네 어디 다딘 저 다딘 단이 뭐 버티를 탑 동해 저를 탑 되는 담이 철로 망고다리오레티.
And so in this world, there are two systems. And one of those systems is the religious system. And there are various religions in the world. And all of these religions treat the inner aspect of the mind itself, as most important. And they are a method to become liberated from suffering. They are a method to liberate from the causes of suffering. And they recognize that the causes of suffering lie within the mind. So most of the religions gather actually within the mind. And that is the first system. And the other system is the worldly, mundane system of the normal human life in samsara, who just engage in various mundane activities. And nevertheless, both of these systems try to achieve happiness and try to become free from suffering. So their goal is the same. Only in reliance on the worldly system, there is just no real method to become free from suffering. And that is because there is self-grasping. Self-grasping creates samsara. And even though all beings possess Buddha nature, if they give rise to self-grasping, then they give also rise to the afflictions and then gradually accumulate karma more and more. And their mind then becomes like a block of ice in water. And then there is no opportunity for them to ever become liberated from suffering. And then on the other hand, according to the holy Dharma, the religious system, we are finding the cause of suffering, and that is self-grasping and the afflictions. So the Dharma presents a method to rid oneself from the causes of suffering. And so with that purpose, many religions have spread in the world.
소탈 상치 상하 섬제 남자 만나봐 섬리 그냥 내 담보바 던져 소탈 시바티 내 담보바 갑라 들이 다다고서 동안들 때에 동이 저 나디다 뉴모바 빵 내가 그저 사바탄 경제 그렇게 소탈을 나한테 누르게 봐 대례정 대례에서 공나 오 되게 동네 탐색가 나와 뉴모바 나와 탐지 탑도 봐 나디는 탑도 봐 지네 사촉성 뜨거들이 인평을 놓대 들이 뭐 제마시 인평을 놓대 제나 나디 매발로 나디 매발소나 들이 내가 도시게 되와도 다도 상지가 고막 토비 저대 삼중지에 마시네 들이 사촉성 사네 데레갈 들이 사촉성 사 톰나 들이 배 상지를 윤지나 들이 상지 것을 다니에 들이 생각 내로 윤지데 들이 배는 자실래 니마포라 대오거든 자통나 만나도 용거요 빼대다가 산적 가서 그 용지시네 이 상하지 봐 강의들이 가다를 르드세 왕님몽 나 맞다고 봐나 다게 봐난 그래서 아마 샘을 아마 샘들이 샘지 남는 상계를 저연 봐 샘도 상계를 저연 봐 상지 샘을 좋아 이 동시에 이 상하가 동시 봐에 상계가 동 타토 봐시나 가르치야 그러잖아 상계가 동 타토 봐잖아 당보들이 상제는 나기 있었던 만데 상로요 그래 삼지 제보지네 이제 제보 semti모 semti 같이 못 자는 sen도 남카는 자연 거래 sen도 남카는 자라들 라진데 남카는 있으면 봐 라진 고래 그때도 고원 거래 그때 양당은 용 그때 등아 되는들이 유명랑지 맞지야 이런 말들이 고네 이 제들 삼성지가 나더라더니 주거래 다리 주거래 롱거들이 자통하다고 롱거래 자들이 이제 갔나 들이 대달 마도 없이 제탐들라 쪼거들이 나만 나서 로트버거 기와트버거 나서트버거 라서바데 새끼가 동제바 이 상제의 연대 담제 하고는 오다 대다고 공방터버 톱들다 소상하서 남지는 바데 나오는 바게도 대다는 매로 톱이요 봐 실내들이 상하가 동 대다고 고요리 대고니 들이 다다 뭐 소탈리 상신의 적 상신의 상하를 요나 이 상하들이 라만 고요리 라크스와 사야만 고요리 이걸 장매 봐요리 대탕치 리는 양설랑 자베주 주베주 남절주를 매겨도 주. 이 남절 나는 매주 양절인 거 까미. 이 slack 같이 많아요. 이 20발 40바디 그 나동 송작동 토도 예. 대답을 여기에 하고니. 이 대하고 대 강의들은 이 slack 되는 연이 정도 이 따와로 레바라 도가로 홍 오마홍도 열이. 대르지는 자와 탐지 실론도 즉 사탐만 세고도 만나서 있네요. 나는들이 고성톡도 찍바리. 레샤 고성톡섬들이 산지 고성 가라지 레샤들이 하고네. 들이 다 대바가 타타고 라랑하 이 탐지디 오마홍는데 이 대라상하 내 부초중진이 내 마체바 탐지가 고요리. 내가 오마홍들이 랑게 롱나 세명한人들이 생각 오마홍 주인이 들이 데이터나 롱롱 들었더니 dục ba on ne ba yung wa hong ji long dang sem le ta long dang sem le de sem ti ka le de bi chi ra chi le de yo le de chi ra le wa hong de de ne de wa hong de de ne de ba de che me ba wok dang le de nam nin ti ba mi long ye che che dong cha ma de de ba ha le yo lo dong xi ne ni ti ba mi ye wa me ba de le yo ta na de le ko me che de de yo lam tam je la dang bo wa hong me ba gom 들이 되려 겁니 졸람 탐체를 겁서 봐. 들이 제는 이 야도 가들이 목동에 라면 이랬더니 항도로 들이 따사하게 람마 파 이거 차 가리 seb지 와매 봐. 다 차고 요리 들이 항도 어디 봐게 다 똑같이 하게 돼 봐야 동들에.
And so within the holy Dharma, the Buddhist teachings, there are 3 levels of the path. There is the Pratimoksha, the Bodhisattva, and the Vajrayana path. And so a beginning practitioner first understands the Pratimoksha, or the individual liberation path. And so here we are introduced to the workings of karma, cause and effect, the causes of suffering, and we learn to abandon self-grasping, the afflictions, and to accomplish the causes of happiness, loving kindness and compassion. And then once we have habituated to that for a while, we recognize that the root of all suffering ultimately, the root of all afflictions ultimately lies in self-grasping. And understanding that, one then naturally enters the Bodhisattva vehicle. And one recognizes the preciousness of the altruistic mind. One recognizes that if one gives rise to an altruistic mind, then self-grasping naturally diminishes. And as a result of that, temporarily, one will experience the happiness of the higher realms, and ultimately it becomes the cause of attaining enlightenment. So that cause is the mind of loving kindness and compassion. So this is the level of the bodhisattvas. And then having attained that level of bodhisattvas, one gradually recognizes the actual qualities of the Buddha. One recognizes the Buddha to be the very embodiment of the 3 kayas, or the enlightened body, speech, and mind. And one recognizes that these qualities are actually complete within one's own mind, the nature of one's mind. For example, it is like when the sun is shining on a crystal and various rainbow lights manifest. And in the same way, various Buddha emanations manifest. But they all have the same quality of the 3 kayas. So understanding that, one recognizes the quality of the secret mantra, the Vajrayana. So how can we understand the secret mantra? We have said on the outer level, there is the physical body. On the inner level, there are the thoughts, the afflictions, the speech. And on the secret level, there is the mind itself. It is said that within all beings is the Buddha. All beings possess the cause of enlightenment. So the Buddha himself actually arises from the mind. And if one understands actually only that, one really understands the meaning of secret mantra. So what is the ultimate meaning of secret mantra, or the state of enlightenment? So the term is Sangye, the term for Buddha or enlightenment. And Sang means to have cleared away or purified. And what is cleared away is all dualistic grasping to self and other. And then with that, love and compassion expands and becomes great. And when compassion is great, the mind becomes vast and extensive, just like space, like the sky. And that is the second syllable, Gye, vast or expansive. And if one understands the mind to be like space, one naturally understands non-duality, because one knows that within space there is no duality or division. So one understands that, and then one experiences this understanding continuously again and again. And as one abides within that space-like nature, ordinary afflictions cannot arise. So that is the meaning of expansive mind. So then, understanding the Buddha in this way, we understand that because the Buddha's mind is expansive love, the Buddhas are natural emanations of loving kindness and compassion. So their nature abides like the Dharmakaya, and then from the Dharmakaya nature arise the Sambhogakayas, like rainbows in the sky. And then the Nirmanakayas appear in this world to ordinary sentient beings who have not realized that. And then the Nirmanakayas appear in various forms. There is, for example, the created Nirmanakaya, there is the incarnated Nirmanakaya, or the manifold Nirmanakaya, and so on, appearing in order to benefit sentient beings. So this is how we can understand the quality of the Buddhas, the qualities of the Buddhas, when one attains the state of enlightenment. So understanding that, we see that if we engage in the practice of the Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and Vajrayana vehicles, that is the result that we can actually attain. So this is how we can understand the purpose, the meaning of the secret mantra. So first we enter the Pratimoksha, then from there the Bodhisattva, and then the Vajrayana vehicle. And within the Vajrayana vehicle, there are many different deities. There are millions and countless forms of the deity and countless mandalas. And we can engage in the practice of each of them. There are the 4 classes of Tantra, of practicing these deities. The Acharya Tantra, the Kriya Tantra, the Yoga Tantra, and Anuttara Yoga Tantra. And when we come to the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, or the unsurpassed Yoga Tantra, then here we understand finally that although there are so many forms of the deity, all the deities are wisdom beings, and therefore they are the same. Their body, speech, and mind are the same. Their body is a union of appearance and emptiness. Their speech is a union of sound and emptiness. And their mind is the union of awareness and emptiness, which is also called the Vajra of the mind. And so when we practice the creation stage of the deity, according to the Om Ahung, all the deities at the forehead are marked with a syllable Om, the throat with Am, and the heart with Hung. And that shows that within the expanse of primordial wisdom, all the Buddhas are one. So the body, speech, and mind of all the deities, no matter how many there may be, are all the same. And that is represented by the syllables Om Ahung. When we know that, we can understand that any deity is the embodiment of all the Buddhas' body, speech, and mind. And also the Om Ahung is the ultimate mantra recitation. All the mantras of secret mantra are included within the Om Ahung. That also actually then completes all the samaya of secret mantra. Within the Om Ahung, all the samaya of secret mantra is included, because all the mantra is included. And then moreover, the Om Ahung mantra recitation is a method to bring together, to merge the wind energies and the mind. Because when the mind thinks of Om Ahung, then this is where the wind energies will go. And in this way, the winds and the mind will merge. So how we merge it with the winds is with the inhalation, we think Om. With a brief holding, we think A at the navel. And then with the exhalation, we think Hung. And so that is a method to merge the winds and the mind. And what happens when we merge the winds with the mind is that we sustain mindfulness. A wisdom mind gradually arises through the practice of the Om Ahung. And if we always practice the Om Ahung, then all our breathing, day and night, becomes mantra. It is said that there are 21,000 rounds of breathing in a day and night, in a single day. And all of that, all the breathing becomes mantra. And as a result, the mind achieves a state of non-distraction, of mindfulness. And then that is carried into all our day-to-day activities. First, we habituate the mindfulness of the Om Ahung in our day-to-day activities. And once we are habituated to that, we can also bring that into the night when we are sleeping. Then naturally, since we are also breathing at night, we will remember the Om Ahung. And if we are able to do that, we come very close to the actual path of the secret mantra of the Vajrayana. And that is because through the practice of the Om Ahung, the mind achieves a state of non-distraction. So the ultimate meaning of the Om Ahung practice lies within the ultimate meaning of secret mantra.
Then Jedi Rank one to the Chokoyori. They come in Lama Chukata law, Lama Chukate, Chukanakata, to get a chop the Yori, Nakata, Chukanakata also. The Malay Baki Kong Zog the torso, send it into one I can chop the Yori, this is over Sokata in the Kong Yori, so Natala, so much the Jachimo Hako Yori. The student, that's all it's in then Chukanakata charging the longer range. 강, 라, 강, 라마 강 써왔다가 대 탐제 산제 탐제 되다니 라마 산제 탐제 되바 거기에 늘 산제 돼. 송 탐제 탐제 돼. 톡 산제 되나? 이런 게 생기 준다 라마가 생기 준 이거 차대 요리. 이거 관계 대선 공부 라마다 나신 산제선 저도 유지 바래. 저도 또 본난 줄라서 들이 따와서 또나더니 라마 톡 따랑 생이라 루카카요 생기가 차로 요리. 대 따라서 하냐도 대 하고니 이 정말 남은 남들 양이지네 이제 다 남은 남들 양이지 버가니 왕들인 게 요래 이 남은 것에 다 부지리 이제 통다에 이 마상 가는 작은 거 쌌단 이 무셔리 건나 공자 통다에 송작동 하려나라 하려나라 다 공가이게 되는 하가 다 탐지 다니라 다봐 남게 나랑 처럼나 되게 너무 받아서 나도 탐지 파치 다로 요래 하가 달았더니 코에 박차 다들 첫 박차 요용요리 내려지네 라고제데 남도리 가시리게 그거리 사이 고속 중에 루가 박차다 마데병 하가 박차다 생산 속세거든요 랑 세고 박차다 들루마에서 랑 터베체도 그래서 왕기바데 라마는 그 요리 대장들이 왕통에 라마라 왕들이 바데 같이 모여리 늘 라마도 있는 거 라마 잡고 omle어서 가고 주 대라나 랑 루라 포마타더니 른데 칭통만 매잡아나게 그리 랑 가고 거 된저 송사 그리 라면 렘바네 아래 주 그리 선왕들 다다 좀 하고 달리 저 송사 그리 토가 홍매들이 어전 그 보더랑 행가 같은데 그리 센데 있었는데 오빠 가네 그리 랑 세고 내lok도 나서 요 내lok도 요지더니 세고 내lok 진바디 그리 상진 무시리 내 방가 마음 맞게 되니 반들이 세고 내lok대 감리들에서 다 가지고 바가 라마자를 나서 뭐요 라신 사제 인장고 마시 나또 죽어 있자 또 마도 나또 파 야야를 쳐다갑지 내 봐요 말 너다 저도 나또 뭐 지나지는 전도 그러면 나또 죽어 있자 또 마도 라와 내록 인자 예 마치 손 근데 나그 세고 나또 탐제다 따라 때랑 뭐시나 내 세고 내록 사제 들어가야지 그래 돼 뭐 마시랬더니 다 나중에는 저는 저거 뒤가랬더니 저거 홍래요 좀 됐더니 그래서 이제 바탕에 바탕에 세고 내렸더나 야르더니 라마선다 라마톡다라는 것을 예미라 건 그러니까 뭐 왕들이 이들이 왕선제 왕홍대 고성 토를 줘서 왕집에 가면 라마 오지 공부를 했네 그러면 이제 또 우리 세트들이랑 hin가라 라도 예미 바탕 성공들이 왕들인 거고 그래야지
And so first, when we engage in the practice of secret mantra, we receive a ripening empowerment that ripens the unripe. So what is the difference really between being ripened or unripe? The guru, the Vajramaster who confers the empowerment, is ripened, and the person receiving the empowerment is still unripe. So the difference lies between understanding the meaning of secret mantra or not, and having or not having gained experience in that understanding. So ultimately, however, although that is the difference, one's own body, speech, and mind and the guru's body, speech, and mind are the same. We have obtained the precious human body, and the basis of our mind is Buddha nature, and on that level we are the same. And then the body is created of the 5 elements. And when the 5 elements become purified into the vital essence, then they transform into the 5 wisdoms. From an impure perspective, the subtle essence of the 5 elements are the 5 afflictions, and the subtle essence from the pure perspective are the 5 wisdoms. So with that understanding, we first receive an empowerment, and in the beginning of the empowerment, there is a practice of Guru Yoga. And here we receive the 4 levels of empowerment from the Guru. And we do that in order to recognize that the mental continuum of oneself and the Guru is exactly the same. the Guru's mind is the Dharmakaya, and the Dharmakaya abides like the expanse of space, all-pervasive. Milarepa had said, and that's from his life story in the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa, Milarepa had said, even though my body might perish, my mind will continue to pervade the 5 elements, and therefore whoever supplicates me, I will be right with them. And that is something we can really trust in. So the mind is the Dharmakaya that is expansive like space. And then from that Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya arises. And that then arises in the form of whichever deity or guru one practices or one supplicates to. And they all are an embodiment of the Buddha arising from the Dharmakaya. So when we practice the Guru, and the Guru is also the embodiment of the 3 jewels. The Guru's form is the Sangha, the speech is the Dharma, and the mind is the Buddha. And that mind of the Guru and one's own mind are the same. Jigten Sumgön had said, I am a yogin who has realized that the mind of the Guru, the Buddha, and my own mind are actually one. So when you realize that view, you realize that your own mind is inseparable from the Guru's mind. Although the bodies appear separate, the minds are actually one. So this is why we practice the Guru Yoga first in the secret mantra, where we receive the 4 empowerments from the Guru. And for that, we visualize the pure form of the Guru in space, appearing like a rainbow. And to that Guru, we then actually supplicate. So the appearance of the Guru, the form, is a union of appearance and emptiness, like a rainbow in the sky. And the speech, all sounds are empty, and all sounds become the natural sound of mantra. And so that is related to one's own speech. For example, whatever speech we hear, unpleasant and so on, all of that becomes purified and the nature of the mantra through the appearance of the Guru. And then when that happens, naturally, all the thoughts and afflictions in the mind dissolve. And in that way, all habitual imprints in the mind become purified. So normally when we hear ordinary samsaric speech or sound, when we give rise to clinging to them, then we place more imprints into the mind as we begin to think about these. So that is the purpose of visualizing in this way. When we visualize, for example, the form of the deity, that purifies the imprints of the ordinary body. And when we recite the mantra with the speech, it purifies the imprints of the speech. And when the mind gives rise to bodhicitta, the imprints of the mind are purified. And in this way, we attain the freedom of body, speech, and mind when we receive the empowerment. So in this context of Guru Yoga, we take a self-empowerment through visualizing the Guru, the 4 empowerments of the Guru. So we visualize the Guru in the space and think that first from the Guru's forehead, from the syllable Om, a white light radiates, and that dissolves into your forehead or your body. And the moment it touches you, you should think that your whole body is like a heap of wood that is touched by fire and transforms into fire and becomes the form of the Guru. And then next, from the Guru's throat, from the syllable A, light radiates, red light radiates, and it dissolves into your throat. And as it dissolves, all the sounds, outer and inner in the universe, become the mantra. And then from the Guru's syllable Hung at the heart, blue light radiates and dissolves into your heart. And as it dissolves into your heart, all the thoughts and concepts of the 3 times come to an end in that moment. And you continue to rest within the natural state of the mind, the bare or naked nature of the mind. And that is the actual Buddha. So at that point, there is a moment where all the past thoughts have stopped and the future thoughts have not yet arisen. And that space in between is then the actual natural state of the mind. And then in a text called, a Kagyu text called Calling the Lama from Afar, it says that beings have not recognized their own mind to be the Buddha. And beings have not recognized, they do not understand that thoughts are the Dharmakaya. And so that means that when thoughts arise and you just let them be, you leave them be, they will naturally subside just like a wave on water. And then they cannot do anything. They will just again dissolve. So in that text then it says, and therefore you should let the mind settle in its natural state. And that mind itself in the natural state is the Buddha. So that is the mind that is free of all thoughts, of all thinking. And sentient beings do not recognize that. And because they do not recognize that, they become confused by dualistic perception to self and others. So the light from the Hung syllable has dissolved into your heart, and that brings an end to all the thoughts of the 3 times, and the mind is placed into its natural state. And at that time, you can think that my mind has become indivisible with the mind of the Guru. And so that was the 3rd empowerment. And these 3 levels of empowerment relate to the Om, Ah, and Hung, or the enlightened body, speech, and mind of the Guru. And then the 4th empowerment is when then the Guru before you in space dissolves into light, and then dissolves into you through your crown, and dissolves with your mind completely. And then your mind, your whole being has become inseparable from the Guru. So this is how we take the 4 empowerments of the Guru.
근데 남이 제법 값서 시거를 같이 보지요. 강시거를. 라마다 예당과 꼭 검도디 대탐 이제 톡도 죽어래. 죽어난 가다 톡도 참아 찍바리. 되는 것들 롱거리라는 거 슬라이 거서 라마카리고 라마 것이 롱거 자송다 왜 롱거도 자송다 왜 말이지. 이 소수 류도 죽거래. 그쪽 생기 담배랑이 생기 담배 섭대식 정보대 요는 정도 내가 레당 뭐 왕가 족 나만나서 자서 선대 이제 상지 이제매 내가 들어봤다지 강도 들어봤더니 뉴모부터 먹고 들어봤더니 들어 들이도 자고 들어봐 매상 때라서 봐 뉴모가 라서 그냥 레게 되게 되버렸더니 족지면이라서 봐 서대는 난 선대 이제 되더니 상지에 설리대 들어봤다 그래야지 죽을 마서 생기 담지 죽고 그 공세요 상네 이때는 때들이 다 뉴모 잡고 요래 근데 죽고 그 롱거다 죽고 냠상 안 하고 이거 소 죽고 되더니 야 롱거라 그 롱거는 죽어야 상자지요 와 뒤도 시거래지.
And so from a practical perspective, there is one point that is very important to understand. And that is when we practice, we visualize either the form of a guru or we visualize a Yidam deity. We need to understand that their mind is the same. Their mind is the Dharmakaya, and that is like space by nature. And then the form of the deity or the guru appears as the Sambhogakaya. And the Sambhogakaya is like a rainbow in the sky. And then one's own body, the practitioner, that is the Nirmanakaya. And actually, all the sentient beings of the 6 realms are emanations of a Nirmanakaya. And that is because they all possess the basis of Buddha nature. And only temporarily, due to their individual karmas and afflictions, they appear in various forms. But the basis of their mind is the mind of the Buddha. It is Buddha nature. And only temporarily, they appear as various emanations or Nirmanakayas, depending on their afflictions. So the manifestation, in a way, the emanation body of the affliction of ignorance, for instance, is an animal. Or the emanation body of desire or attachment is a human, and so forth. So beings appear as a reflection of their own afflictions in pleasing or unpleasing forms, in various forms. But the inner basis of their mind is the same. It is the Buddha. And their outer body is the Nirmanakaya. So if we understand that all sentient beings are actually Nirmanakaya emanations, then we have really come very close to understanding that basis. And so when we engage in practice, we understand that from the expanse of the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya manifest. And if we practice, then from the Nirmanakaya, we ultimately attain enlightenment into the expanse, going back to the Dharmakaya.
왕비 랑차베 기서 톱제도 가리 톱소문잖아. 라면 톡대 톱소문. 라면 톡톱니 가리 정소. 오, 랑게 센데 강양 다다 강양 쌈놈에 봐 대마 똥바리 예르디 센들이랑 그러고 이게 홍은 조성 되는 정도 이게 홍대지 뭐서 이게 홍대더니 형네미나 제가 너무 저거를 떼와로 제가 하는 게 르칸당 때문에 냠인당 때문에 가와 되는 거 저거요. 그러니까 떼와지 가는 다른 냠이 때문에 떼와로 본다. 아니 제가 르칸 대상 뱅기 요리 저당 홍 대화를 곰 대냠다 형가를 곰 사냠 제발 요소 싸우고 거기 던지 형가를 곰 대화는 전에들이 대화를 곰 들이 송고 요래 이게 홍대들이 유심지 상지 탐지거든요 토토의 동반이들이 이게 홍은 이제는 이 홍을 자대나 그래서 동다 첨보 요래 저는 안에 홍유는 요바던들이 나도 박차 탐지 그 직접 또 듣고 요래 또니들이 생위자들 또야 요말 sem싸고 차는 거 요래 나도 박차도 또 요래 대다가 동시에들이 다 라공하데 감각 같더니 홍디 하죠 이게 아침 보이마 자당 롱게 욕당들이 홍디 ram인도 돼요 그래 동다시는 딱 이게 홍라 이게 홍디 자치 뭔지 그리 대기서더니 나 오하도 대바 제법 같더니 오하도 대바 내가 가리 팽거리 되나 롱당 샘년제 그 요래 근데 맞이는 누가 가리거리 되나 롱당 샘주 가가도 샘도 나도 니모 지선 당로 요래 롱대 ram인도 요래 그래서 또 나로 그냥 미타지 롱당 샘이 적도 전에 되게 롱생을 아망 더서 샘이 와매 봐 자, 듣고 요래 때려들이 제lep과 탐지를 짜장 됐다고 요구 요래 설비지 보내요. 낭바그들이 낭 산속센터 때문에 들이 롱샘이라 때문에 산속센 줄을 껴와 때렸더니 껴처럼 막고 사기 고방을 먹네. 이 다른 공부 요래 또 강남이 지나지 그 미심진 탐지를 피고 탐지 왔다고 말하는 거니 그냥이 제거를 했지.
And so ultimately, when we receive these four empowerments, what we attain by that is the actual mind of the Guru. We merge with the mind of the Guru. And that mind is the empty, thought-free state of mind, the natural empty awareness. And that awareness, that is this empty, thought-free awareness, this then becomes the syllable Hung. And you can only visualize the syllable Hung. Never forget about the syllable Hung. If you have no difficulties with meditating on the heart, or no difficulties with heart illnesses and so on, then you can visualize the syllable at the heart, or you can also visualize at the navel. So you can practice in whichever way suits your body and disposition the most. For example, if you're a practitioner of the channels and the winds, you can visualize the Hung at the navel. And that actually is very beneficial for the well-being of your body and your whole constitution. It is said that the navel chakra is related to the experience of bliss and the heart chakra to the experience of clarity. So if it comes easy to you to sustain clarity, you can visualize at the heart, or if bliss comes easier, you can visualize at the navel. So that is up to you, up to your own disposition and likings. And so the Hung syllable represents the mind of all the Buddhas of the three times, the empty mind of all the Buddhas. So the mind is empty, and that has the nature of the syllable Hung. And also the sound Hung. The sound also is very meaningful. When you exclaim the sound Hung, or you visualize the syllable Hung, in that instant, the Hung has the power to shatter all thoughts and habitual imprints in the mind. And the basic nature of the mind can never be shattered. The mind remains with great clarity. All that is shattered are the thoughts and the imprints in the mind. And also when you visualize a deity or you recite a deity's mantra, whatever deity you practice, the Hung is always very precious, because the visualization and the mantra recitation naturally have the nature of Hung when combined. So you can always just practice Hung and consider that to be most essential and most important in the practice. And so the practice of the Oma Hung, the benefit of this practice is that this practice merges or brings together the winds and the mind. Because when the winds and the mind do not merge, they will go separate ways. And then the mind will follow the various thoughts, and the wind will travel all over the place. The mind will become distracted. So according to the practices of Naropa, when we practice the channels and the winds, there is a method to combine the winds and the mind. And when they are joined, then the mind remains undistracted. So that is the purpose. And that is similar to training one's body, for example. Scientists exercise their bodies, their outer body. And in the same way, Buddhists exercise the inner mind by cultivating bodhicitta as the basis And then on the basis of that, practicing the combining of the wind energies and the mind. And they do that with a view for future lifetimes, with a goal to attain enlightenment. So that is the purpose of the practice of the channels and the winds. And what is most important is that whichever practice you engage in, it is most important to never separate from the wish to benefit all sentient beings.
전대 특마보 데이터 봐. 농고 데이터 봐. 들이 차는. 이 좋게 이마마 차르고 사랑 이 르네 정보지 가서 정보지는 다 농고 유린다고 제거. 유린 강나. 들이 반항 감데 이제 그 강대와 사지 탐제 주섬제 사지 탐제 고송 토게 용지 야송다거든. 나고 반항 감대고 말해. 이 전대 요래 됐다. 삼삼은 야송 차례 연구요래. 됐다. 문제들이 이 시간을 하고 용왕가에 가는 랑징이요 봐. 도바체 보게 가다 그래서 뭐 이제 삼지 랑징 그 접대요래. 라는 이제 삼지 전화보다 여기 좀 받아 되는 이제 정말들이 산지 탐지 사람 야송을 다 받을 때 막 어쨌든 들들이 홍대 때와라 건 때와라 루메지라 들이 롱보라 들이 루메지 치는 거 요래 때를 도를 때는 루메 보면 루메지라 탐송삼 때를 때다 냐봐요 뒤감리 선지 때와는 제 롱송지나데 롱공 이거 말이 해서 뭐 봐게 다 샤도 등들 롱 때와라 대사 좀 저도 간다 되나 하나가 롱공고 말이지 우리 속도 이 대해서 차오차게 이가들이 아들들 탐송 들이 홍지에 들이란 게 단진당 뉴모 바탐제더니 도와가다 말더니 살아 파 타송사 대다고 거들이 앙튼 통통통통 이런 통통들이 곰 천장만 먹고 들이지기서 양 이렇게 오는 기다 오마홍 내 제법감이 이렇게 쉬고 가도 산다나 아들 이제 부터 뛰어와는 게임도 봐 언제 안 나오지 아들 남도 뛰어와는 게임도 봐 그럼 탐색이 오고 말이죠 산탄 미소 잡을감이 양쪽이 아들 메트로 탐송사 들이 홍지 정말 이 막장 먹고 그랬더니 홍지 답도 감지 봐 동바장 그리기는 오하도 되게 봐 조랑세고 그래.
And so in the beginning practitioners still have a wish to receive the blessings, the compassionate blessings, and that is because in the beginning there still is self-grasping. And so in the beginning when we practice the Amahung Vajra recitation, it is a method to cultivate mindfulness day and night in whatever we do. So whenever you can think of it, that is the best. So in the morning, first of all, most important when you get up in the morning before sunrise, you should sit with a back straight, with a straight spine. And at that time, you should practice what is called Chulen, or extracting the essences, the vital essences. And that is understanding that the space is pervaded by particles of rainbow light. The entire space actually is always pervaded by these very subtle strings of rainbow light. And these actually represent the body, speech, and mind and all the qualities of all the Buddhas of the 3 times. And these subtle rainbow lights in space are actually always present. And sometimes they manifest as a rainbow. They are the natural reflection of the 5 wisdoms. So in this way, the 5 wisdoms are actually always naturally present, pervading space. And through this practice, we extract the essence of these 5 wisdoms. So according to the Dzogchen terms, for example, this natural presence of the 5 wisdoms, it is referred to as the primordial purity and the spontaneous presence. So the blessings are actually always naturally present. So coming to the Amahung then, first after you sit straight in the morning, you inhale the air and you think Om. And at that time you can think that you're inhaling all the blessings of the Buddhas in the form of these rainbow lights. And then the winds go down and merge at the navel. And here you think Ah. At the navel, you can visualize a fire, like a little lamp, a fire flame, inside which there is the Hung being the nature of the wind. So the moment the inhalation, the wind meets with the fire at the navel, it fans the fire and the fire grows stronger. So you think that these subtle winds dissolve into the Ah at the navel. And here you can meditate for just a little while and look at your mind. So in the beginning, it is necessary to practice gently, to not hold the winds very forcefully or retain the winds for an extended time, but to retain the winds briefly and very gently at the navel, so in a very natural manner. So you just think that naturally the winds have dissolved into the Ah at the fire flame at the navel, and here you think Ah. And then you exhale the air thinking Hung, and here you can think that all the self-grasping and the afflictions leave your body with the exhalation in the form of smoke leaving your body. And then you can practice this for a little while, for a short, brief while, but repeat that frequently. And bring the Om Ahung Vajra recitation then into your day-to-day activities. So whenever you can think of it, whenever you are mindful, think of the Om Ahung. But most important is the Ah abiding at the navel. And of course, you cannot always think about the Om Ahung in all your activities, but sometimes when you take a break and so on, you have time, you can again bring it back to mind and think that with your inhalation, the winds again dissolve into the fire at the navel, and you think Ah. And again, you exhale, thinking Hung. So here, there actually is no real visualization for the Om Ahung. It just is a natural process of breathing. So whenever you exhale the air with a Hung, think that naturally all the thoughts and the afflictions and so on leave your body. So this is how you can practice the Om Ahung Vajra recitation in your day-to-day activities. So when we first in the beginning engage in practice, we have cultivated some altruism in the beginning. And so in the beginning, we first of all understand that altruism or bodhicitta actually benefits oneself the most. Because we understand that if we give rise to bodhicitta, then self-grasping diminishes. And if it diminishes, then we attain enlightenment. Oneself attains enlightenment. So we cultivate such a mind of love when we, for example, think about the kindness that others have given us. So we give rise to an altruistic mind because we understand, first of all, it benefits ourselves. And when we understand the benefit of that, that is the time when we begin with the practice of Tonglen, of giving and taking. And so that you can practice visualizing your guru or any Yidam deity. And it doesn't matter whether or not the creation stage or the visualization of the deity is so clear. It is sufficient if the deity approximately appears in your mind. Actually, if just the color of the deity appears in your mind, it is sufficient. And that is necessary because one's own mind is like a mirror. In reality, there's nothing really there. And we only fabricate this idea of a self. And so when we change that and instead think of the deity, because the mind is like a mirror, the mind will become that deity, will actually become the deity. And that thought needs to be habituated over and over again to the point where you never forget about the deity. And then if you never forget about the deity, then your mind has accomplished the deity. And so of the deity, there is the body and the mind. And to attain the body of the deity is rather easy. When we think of the deity, the mind becomes the deity. But then what we actually need to cultivate is the mind of the deity, and that is bodhicitta, a wish to benefit others. And at that moment, when that mind is present, then the deity becomes the actual wisdom being. If that thought is absent, then only the form is the deity, but not the mind, and then it is only a worldly god. So that is something to be careful about. It is necessary that when you practice a Yidam deity, that you always do so on the basis of a wish to benefit sentient beings.
동해를 삼았다. 소소의 동해의 강을 누가지 요 강을 좀 동해의 뉴모 발이 좀 빼는 담담벌는 탐촉적서 농바답이 요 강을 좀 시당 차도에서 시당 차도 강에서 나진에서 아주부주부 제고 서로 데려들이 대체해서 돈 동해 삼지 시당 다 차도를 맞은 거 직장 요 말이지. 나진은 맞은 거 직장 요 말이. 오 노르들 동해의 저또 나진 집을해서 감성 신지 삼지가 나다. 랑그 나딘 삼지 직바 레란 말에 딱 제다 직바 직장을 해야 돼. 대외 나 기반에 뭐니 가족 되나 이거 말이 소리 나제랑 요요 말이 나 매봐라 나도 정말 대외지 다때 매박도 못 해도 가리는 코바 토마미 받았다 공주 나제랑 언니 이 잠도 나게 차론 따로 차요 성계 기반에 잠도 따로 해 잠도 첨보용에 잠도 처럼 이요 말이 상기 장미 봐요나 장치철 이제 반틀에 담기 담기 락다버라 심진 고와디 차론 따버리 차론 따 강리 나디는 유모밖에 유모게 레사 레디 박차르디는 이 고와도 저거 봐 니바도 대하고 뭐도 또 나지리 데르티미들이 꼭 양가 박함들이 심진 담기 나디인데 다른 게 양업해요 양군들이 때하는 매거들이 매제로 포리 매제로 넘자 봐야되는데 심진 담기 나디지 책송 나도 이제 책들이 인피를 올려서 온대양 아들이 메라템 홍들이 롬딩한테 산속에서 인피로 랑지 인피로 돼 됐기나 오 나뭐 나디지 랑 나디지 하고 나디인데 어디번에 대 책송 대책은 다 인피로 랑 지는 인피로 돼 심지 탐색을 대다더니 파탄 흥들이 심지 탐색을 잡요서 근데 뭐 방송도나 나한테는 요거 와뭐 bakkam들 또 안 나쁘나 봐. 그리 뭐 마도들이 일점 양으로 사들 사랑 매 받기는 저기 좀 장미 받들이 심지 탐색을 잡아 봤당요. 들이 되게 탐색을 뭐도 바로 너도 바로 너 세도 봤어요. 들이 사족선 맞지 왔던데 지와대 들이게요. 심지 탐색 첩성상 참 소소까지 잡산도 같대나 라면서 쳤다 버리. 오, 민물이 감성 심기 담대 또 자치와 장외와 대하고 되게 레낭 박차대 삼대 레낭이 봐 하고 이봐 누구에도 나한테 뭐 하고니 오, 들이다 대답해. 우리 피고서 로지는 들이다 잡고 요래. 너는 상민지 쳐담치는 우리 대답 잡고 요래. 들이 본데 아 대답을 생각하는 초반은 저러고 요래. 심기 담대를 농는 저러고 요래. 이 빠졌을 때 이치 땜보지 못하니 무슨 팽도 없어. 들이 다 돈이 거는 대답 공부했지.
And so then we think about the suffering of sentient beings and what is the cause of their suffering. The cause of suffering of all beings arises from the afflictions. For example, in this world there are many countries where there is much war, and the cause of that is actions committed with a mind of hatred and jealousy. And all of that arises ultimately from self-grasping, the wish for one's own happiness, the selfish mind. And that is where all suffering really comes from. There's really no suffering that doesn't come from that. It all comes from self-grasping and then hatred and jealousy and so on. So in brief, even the slightest suffering has its cause in self-grasping only. And so understanding that, then you should think, is the self-grasping, that self of all the sentient beings in the three realms of samsara, and my own self-grasping the same or not? And when you really look at it, you will see it is exactly the same. And then when identifying the self, where actually is that self? When you look at that, it is actually nowhere. It is only something that we have fabricated. We are holding on to a self where actually there is no self. And then, however, why is it then not possible that we just let go of it? And that is because we have habituated to this idea since beginningless time in samsara. And so therefore, the mind has become like ice blocks floating on the ocean. The Buddha mind is like the vast ocean. There are countless Buddhas, the ocean is vast, but there is no duality, no division in the vast ocean. And the various enlightened activities of these Buddhas are like the waves on the ocean. And on the other hand, the mind of sentient beings in samsara is like blocks of ice. And that is due to self-grasping. Due to self-grasping, we give rise to afflictive emotions. And these emotions lead us to accumulate karma. And these actions of karma, they place an imprint, a habitual imprint in the mind. And these imprints then create samsara. So that is really important to understand. The root of all samsara is self-grasping. So for another visualization, when you inhale the air, you can think that I'm inhaling all the self-grasping and obscurations of sentient beings. Then the air goes down to the navel, where you visualize a fire flame, and think that this inhalation of self-grasping of sentient beings, all of that then dissolves into the fire at the navel, just like pouring oil into fire. So think that in this instant, all the self-grasping of sentient beings is burned away, and the self-grasping transforms into altruism. So you inhale with Om, and you think in this way, drawing in all the self-grasping of beings. Then with Ah, it dissolves into the fire at the navel. And then with Hung, you exhale and think that your own bodhicitta, or the self-grasping which has become altruism, then is exhaled and pervades all beings. So first of all, we need to identify self-grasping. This is self-grasping. And then we draw it in, and then you visualize now it has been burned away. And then it becomes an altruistic mind after having been burned away. And then that altruistic mind is exhaled with the syllable Hong. And think that that then pervades all sentient beings. So this is how you could visualize. Or you can also visualize that when you inhale the air, that the self-grasping and the afflictions appear in the form of a dark or black smoke. And then when you exhale the pure air, having purified that, you can think that it is purified in the form of seed syllables or like rainbow forms of Chenrezig or Tara and so forth, whichever deity. And then pervades all beings and brings them whatever they need. For example, if they need wealth, it brings them wealth, or if they need children, it brings them children, or if they need food, it brings them food, and so on. And it creates bodhicitta in the minds of those who have not given rise to bodhicitta. So in this way, you can think that it pervades all beings. And whether or not you have the capacity to pervade all beings, you can only see when you look at your own mind. So when you look at your own mind and you see, first of all, the vast suffering of all the sentient beings in the three realms, you understand sentient beings are limitless, and likewise their karmic visions and imprints are limitless. Then next second, you understand the root of all that suffering is self-grasping. And understanding that third, you want to help them, you want to benefit them. And if you have that wish of wishing to benefit them, then you have the capacity to pervade them. The greater your love and compassion, the greater also your capacity to pervade all sentient beings. So you pervade sentient beings with compassion, and that purifies their obscurations. And at the same time, you can also think that this mind also pervades all the Pure Lands, and there it makes offerings to all the Buddhas. And so in this ability to benefit, you should have a very firm trust or firm confidence. So this is how we can apply the Amma Hung in the context of Tonglen.
이 소리 르나 나타 정도 가서 가시 나타 동네 뒤네 우리 잡기는 뭐 제거요래 탑 라마다 제거를 매기디 이나 뒤감에들이 또 강에 나 나타데 자고 나타들이 탈고 사람들이 나타도 생기 종대와는 착해요래. 지금 내도 따는 매나 어쨌든 오청 지금 내도 요살이 대선이 지금 내도 요알이 좀 생기 종대와는 착해요래. 이감이 당보 내게 나바시고래 강시거래. 내도 르게 나타리를 세부 나타리. 르게 나타리. 르도 다도 좀 있는 안 나가요래. 레드 가능용들 레드 기왕 하마거든요. 라게 이나 르라 동득 나사 이 르라 나사 다 딜레레. 뒤박 차이나 다다다 가이지. 오 니게 네 강다장들 라고 부르는 수고 그래. 니 나타네 멋진들 용나 용고 요리 최선만 용나 용고 요리. 내가 산지에서 소들이 물을 못 채 동행 용나. 니 다다 무슨 부르는 치 보고 그래. 셀때서 때나. 그래서 제가 부르는 치 보고 소를 빼서 물을 못 채니 니 손도 대고 좀 고원 나와 잠이 좀 송디. 방문이 물리들은 가 동네 에서 정말 되더니 나 동네 이걸 못 산게 요리. 내가 페인게 요리. 동도나 나타도 페인게 요리. 근데 이 때부터 마시면서 생긴 담배 다 나타대라고 망보 요리. 나타 동네에서 담배 동네가 나타 세는 좀 대답게 동네 세는 좀 어떻게 감성 생긴 담배가 나타게 탑 많이 와죠. 설레야 용왕 알려줘 봐. 나 세는 것도 이제 빨리 내 거서 탑이 산도 거서 동네 양도 오고 요래. 가래들은 매만 보지 그렇게 보지 내려오나. 오, 뒤에 저들이 그렇게 보지 사빠바가 서로 땀나. 뒤에 초그라가 또 저들이 생기 참부터는 양도 오고 요래. 대답하지. 오, 이 핀셈 집었던 게 생기 탐지는 문에 편이 요래. 대 필마한테 소설하는 것들이 동네에다가 나지를 소설 편이 이는 편이 뛰고 싸고 yap고 단 대지서 다시 탐지가 탑 영화를 켜지. 나의 레다 박차 탐지 지와대로 상로 요리. 그러고도 중요한 이제 밖에 같이 나타서 동네 가면 되게 요리. 그래서 내 양을 따로. 그래서 탐지가 멋진들하게 보는 수로 요리 좀 드리티는 양 생기 탐지 나타 조금 대고가 양을 대대하게 매서 랑을 랑을 차와진 게 뭔가이 파트. 드리티 한 동안이 루스타동 야동다가 따뜻하다 보니 저 양탕도 쓰나. 드리티 이빙을 로테르티니 나디니 탈 들이 때렸더니 랑을 루이나차 양들로 오요래 변나 난 나디들 따르나 근데 동이가 또 나디는 요래 때거든요 따다면서 나차라 제가 뱅글에 했지 나차 양들로 오요래 했지.
And so also often people experience various illnesses, discomfort, and then in order to relieve that, they apply various methods such as long life practices or medical treatments and so on. But it is the case that people think about their illness. They think, I want to be healed from this illness. And if they keep thinking about the illness, they're actually holding on to the illness with their mind. For example, if somebody actually does not have an illness and goes to see a doctor and the doctor tells them, oh, you probably have that illness, then they will think that they have that illness and might even create that illness by holding on to that illness. So first of all, we need to recognize the nature of that of sickness, of physical pain. That what actually is sick? Is it the body or is it the mind? It is actually the body and not the mind. And it is precisely because we grasp at the body as the I, we identify with the body, that we are sick. It is because in a previous life we have accumulated corresponding karma. In a previous life we have hurt the bodies of others. We have abused them or beaten them. We have hurt their bodies in some way. And that is the karma ripening from that. And so in that sense you can think that in any case I will have to pay off this debt, this karmic debt. Whether it is in this life or in future lives, I have to purify this karmic debt. And actually the Buddha had said that experiencing suffering in the life of a precious human body actually repays much of the karmic debt. It is just like you have a loan to pay back, and if you have just a piece of gold, a small piece of gold, you can pay back a big loan. So that is like the piece of gold is like the precious human body. We can pay back a great karmic debt. Or the Buddha also had said the negativities of wandering in the 3 lower realms is purified by a single headache. So it is said that when we obtain a precious human body and engage in Dharma practice, then just the slightest suffering actually will purify the suffering that would have to be experienced for a long time in the future. So in that regard, also actually you should think that the sickness is very beneficial. And then other sentient beings do not understand that. And for this reason, they experience much suffering and illness. So bring all those sentient beings that do not understand that and who do suffer to mind, and think that now I am the representative of all the sentient beings, of all the illness and suffering of all the sentient beings in the three realms. May it all ripen on myself. So on the outer level, sentient beings appear separately due to their various karmas, but think that actually our mind is one, our mind is the same. And so by me taking on their suffering and experiencing it instead of them, it lightens their suffering, it reduces some of their suffering, because the basis of our mind is actually one. For example, it is just like there's a large mountain of snow that presses on many people. If just a bit of the snow like melts and comes off, it becomes that much lighter. So in this sense, think that I'm benefiting sentient beings by purifying the thought of suffering, my own suffering, and because our minds are one, it also lightens their suffering. And so that is on the basis of understanding that the root of all suffering is self-grasping. And understanding that, you can really become the representative of all sentient beings, bringing them to mind. And understanding that it is only that due to our karmas and imprints that we appear separately, but the basis is the same. And so very often people experience difficulties or fall sick, especially when they engage in Dharma practice. But in fact, this is a sign that the karmic debt, the karma is very light, and that we now have a chance to repay this karmic debt that in any case we will have to repay. So sometimes you can bring to mind all the suffering of sentient beings in this way, as you inhale the air and then think it dissolves into the fire at the navel and it is burned there. And then think that being burned there, then your entire body becomes into a mass of fire, and all affliction and the body and all is burned away, and the body becomes completely empty, or like a rainbow, clear and empty. So if you practice in this way again and again, and through such altruistic mind, self-grasping is destroyed, the self-grasping of all beings. And that actually also will lighten the experience of your own illness, pain or suffering. So it is on the basis of understanding that the root of all suffering is self-grasping, and when there is no self-grasping, then there's also no suffering, no illness and pain. So understanding it in this way, even if there is suffering and pain, it will become lighter.
놀라다다데 뭐가 남을 망보 이거래. 그래서 레레레레 근데 봐. 진짜 봐 대레선데. 타톡은 봐 적강이들. 타톡은 봐 처음에 용단다고 그래. 다다다. 다 정말 봐도 다스고 정들이 그래서 그 남을 제토고를 맞지 제부터 봐 타마 제토고 요래. 내 담비 리드 돌이 더 잘하래. 이런 거 샘데 되는 코가 도마면 계속해서 샘게. 내들이 다타를 내다 박차데 뭐 마시노. 이 야처럼 망보랬더니 바동이 유는들이 전능 그 무보통 치마를 샤르더니 동행 연구에 대리 도움을 쳐야지 생각 용단이라고 그래. 용단 기지 따와 가려리더라. 따와 되더 용단 참마도 이제는 시랍 로고요래. 대시 봐요. 시랍도 냠도 로고요. 빼나 오와 홍디라. 직장 말이나. 샘 로마팅 샘 랑가를 로고요. 로마팅 샘이 뜨먹지. 밤에 봐 샘리. 대그 봐더니 박차 두고 차라고 요래. 뒤는 엄중히 아주 홍중이 시랍은 거라고 요래. 데르티니 빌 만나는 그 루메다고 저 진짜도 용리소래. 데르티니 문에 짜와거든니 독에게 짜와대. 단딩이 데르 쪽으로 삼중계선 되고 요래. 데르 쪽으로 타게 삼중계에서 총통마도 요 말이. 그 삼중계 치고 간이 톡거리더라. 데 예담사다 군조가 톡고 요래. 사제 탐지게 톡. 데 가리는 데 토바 탑들이 라티 라마티 야담티 상유티 데 탐지티는 가리거든요. 데라 대리인지부터 또업돼 요래. 무슨 남바게 좀다 탐지를 봐라 강데 또 없으면 되네 요래. 또 없으면 되는 대화시나 다 탐지들이 비밀 다톡 비밀 제보들 강도 생겼던 연구도 생겼던 가리 연구도들 나딘 총들하고 그러고 나딘 총들 손에 시랍체를 하고 시랍체를 손에 시랍은 다톡바 가리 상제들 나딘님에와 하고네 나딘님에와 하고는 나딘님이 저는 무보통 치마 나딘이 용좀에 저는 저바탕처럼 랑인 것들이 도마다버지 제 나딘님에 bak감들이 직통매와 차로 말이 선지가 거당신감이 요리 마도와를 요리 참아 제 탐지 딱부신가 거당신감 탐지 딱 진지지 하고 요리 니 매와라 때는 장토치 못다고 장토치 미쳤더라 니요 말이 이거 장토치 뭐 요리 남카 요리 또봐 요리 제 탐지 요게 될 니요 말이 데이터들이 상제 탐지 뉴스메 봐지 뉴스메 봐 동지 하고 나중에 봐 주고 대회는들이 단지 동치 아니지 현고만 대바적 이제 듣고 요리 현고만 3년기는 이제 듣고 대바적 인기냐 이제 들이들 탑나 만나도 예름 만나도 이제 저 탐지 짜와가리 대바로 속도 인기 속도 대하고 그러지.
And so there are various visualizations that we can practice, and each has their own good quality or power. But then the ultimate quality or power of this practice is the whole purpose is to train the mind. Just like we've mentioned in the scientific world, we train or exercise our bodies. And there are people who have done so and who are able to perform all sorts of athletic things with their bodies that we are not able to do. So that is because they have trained their body. And so likewise, we are training our mind. And that is a mind that since beginningless time we have habituated to a way of thinking. But the mind itself, since beginningless time until now, has always remained. It's without birth and death. And it is only due to our imprints and karmas that we do not recognize that. And so in order to, the purpose of training the mind in this way, recognizing the nature of the mind, is so that in the future lifetimes and in the bardo after death, these various confused perceptions will not manifest, because not recognizing the nature of the mind, all the various perceptions, the confused perceptions in the bardo and so on, will become a real manifestation, a reality to us. So in order to become free from that, we now train our mind in the practice. And so the root of all the training of the mind lies within cultivating a mind of wisdom through sustaining mindfulness. And so this is the way to train the mind. And in order to develop that, we need some sort of reference point, something to refer to, such as the Om Ahung Vajra recitation. If we in the beginning have nothing to refer to, then the mind just remains in like a neutral, indifferent state. And this neutral state actually is a state of ignorance, a state of unmindfulness. And when the mind is unmindful, then it continues to accumulate the habitual imprints of ignorance. So in order to transform that, we need a reference point that supports our mindfulness. And when we think about the Om Ahung, for instance, then the mind transforms into the essence of wisdom or mindfulness. And that is like a lamp flame in the darkness. So the root of all suffering is self-grasping. The method to become free from self-grasping is loving kindness and compassion. And so at this point, our love and compassion is very inferior. So what can we do to cultivate great love and compassion? And what is the method? And the method is to rely on the three jewels, the Yidam deities, all the Buddhas. They are a method for us to attain great love and compassion. So that is why we bring the Yidam, the Guru, the Buddhas to mind. And so how in this way can we cultivate great compassion? It is by virtue of the power of the Tathagatas or the Buddhas. So in Buddhist practice, it is important that we understand the connection to the three powers. There are three powers that accomplish all our practices. And so ultimately, the three powers, the benefit of all practice comes back to the mind, the training of the mind. So when self-grasping gets lesser and lesser, as it gets lesser, wisdom gets stronger. And when wisdom becomes very strong, ultimately we attain enlightenment. And when we attain enlightenment, what we realize is the non-duality of self and others. Then, although we perceive a duality of self and others, we do not perceive it as a reality. There's nothing at all to hold on to. There's no real duality of self and others. So one perceives things, but one perceives them just like an illusion, an illusory appearance. So that is to say that things do not just disappear when one attains enlightenment. There still are the Pure Lands and the Buddha emanations, the Buddha bodies, the 6 realms of samsara, all of that manifests, appears, but at the same time one understands their nature, their non-dual nature. For example, it is like a vast ocean. The ocean is there, but there is no duality in the ocean water. There is no division. Or likewise, there is space and there are clouds and so on, but there is no duality. So in a similar way, there is no duality in the Buddhas, although there are countless of them. So if you understand that, self-grasping will gradually diminish. And then ultimately, when self-grasping diminishes, one sees that there are actually only two fields of reference. There is the higher fields, to whom there is a mind of devotion, and then there is the lower fields of beings, sentient beings, for whom there is compassion. So ultimately, the various practices, creation stage and other skillful means of practice, all of them actually are based on these two fields of reference, of devotion and of compassion. So that is the root. Devotion and compassion is the root of all the practices. So this is how we need to understand the ultimate essence of all practices.
그 다다 온하도리 대반에 개반 타토바 소장하서 남시바가 양민시야 상하고 타토바래 이런 내 가족만 좀 참아 저거 관리 하장 대바 이치 제보 이치 그 대바 요바 미치기나 가령 내가 제름 나서 보면은 살 대바 제보 요 되게 지고 가자게 각자는 염소리 시기요 말이 마양 도시가 말 얘기양 시기요 말 양소리도 제보 요래 대 당시에 대바 이치 요리 눈에 딴데 양민시 조고 요리 대바 이치 요는 사제까지 이치 요리 사제 탑지 찔리 사제 탑지 사족 세번 되고 요리 코와도 찔 코와 나중에 되는 되고 요리 뒤니 뭐 가 이핑을 로리 나중에 소들면 조보사지 이핑스는 좀 동네마다 나한테 도는 좀 책대가 하고 속도는 당나 상태 주보는 득사리 상태 가 사제 톱고 그다음에 드리자 가지 경동이 도리제 빠지 남녀지 밤에 많이 때 남녀지는 되게 요리 탑톱 탑지 이밍으로 톱고 탑지로 상인지 공대나 마찬가지로 대바 톱죠 요리 근데 대바 이치 메나 다 용기 같이 쳤네 그것도 똑같아서 망도 송 그래서 냠이 맞이라 피마면 용기가 요리 대회도 담에 이제 가족만 졸라야 강이 대바지 이치지 대단 간사를 나나나로라 빈산이 되게 납게 요리 근데 냠이 제단 따되는 담으로 다른 망고 요리 도와더니 그것도 망고 요리 되겠더니 나게 내년 담으로 망고 따로리 대린들 라디슈요리 또안내지 다시 또안내지 가리지 다뜻들이 개반 타투밖에 안 되냐니 나게 요리 자바탐지 싫어도 뜻들 slaach도 하지로 되게 요리 다른 뭐 대바지들이는 양득게 요리 되게 강다당 네 빠지래.
And so the Amahung Vajra recitation really is actually the practice of like the ultimate scholar. So even if one is the ultimate practice of the various levels of the path, the Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and the Vajrayana vehicles. And of these, it is the ultimate Vajrayana practice, or secret mantra practice. So I'm giving various instructions at different occasions, but the essence really is to cultivate really a firm trust and devotion. If a person really has a firm trust in karma and devotion to the deity, then even if they do not know how to clearly visualize the creation stage or recite mantra or know many of the scriptures and so on, it is still sufficient for them. There's many who do not have so much learning and knowledge, but they still want to practice. And if they only possess these qualities of devotion and trust, then that actually is sufficient in order to engage in practice. And that is because they firmly trust in the words of the Buddha. And trusting in the words of the Buddha means to understand that all the Buddhas are one. They all gather in the mind of bodhicitta. And all of samsara also gathers in only the mind of self-grasping. And the antidote to that is altruism. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, there are two lines that really summarize it all. It says, the perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. All suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. So if you only understand that and you find that I have love and compassion, then that is sufficient. That is actually what we need to obtain or develop. And then even if you do not know how to recite many mantras, if you only rely on the Amahung Vajra recitation day and night uninterruptedly, that is excellent. And that actually is the ultimate point of practice. What we want to achieve from our practice is a mind of love and compassion, the altruistic mind. So a person who has that actually has already achieved the result. And on the other hand, a person that lacks devotion and trust, even though they might know a lot of things, even though they might have great learning, they also might have a lot of doubts and thoughts in their mind due to their lack of trust and devotion. And then all of that knowledge is of not much benefit to them. So what is of greatest benefit is just to have this simple thought of wishing to benefit all beings. So what I explain is more from this perspective. I explain, I teach at various places and I say various things, and that is really from the perspective of a person like myself who really only relies on devotion and trust. So it is meant for those people who are just like myself, who rely on devotion and trust. And for them then it is sufficient in order to engage in practice. And so many questions actually always come in relation to that, and I give various answers to that. So today, however, I give a very brief, essential instruction, which is really the root of all the practices, and actually really the ultimate knowledge of a great master. So it is to understand ultimately that within the expanse of primordial wisdom, all the deities, all the Buddhas are one. And therefore it is sufficient to rely on a single mantra or on a single deity. So for like, uneducated people who only rely on devotion and trust, that is sufficient.
그래서 다 루탑 탐지더니 다 사마는 사주 그 남들 라미주 매저도 주대 오바 고마라야 드니 동도름 저더니 라당하 탐지 용도 더더요 나양 송하 영보로 더 영보니 영러더 등영 탐지 도달들이 오왕홍러더 들이 들이 강하지 다다 라탑지 뭐 어쩌봐야 봐 대하고네들이 들이 좋다 오왕홍서야 온다 아니 곰송아 리지마 이거 홍주부데 리당아인데 이제 말이 좀 저쪽 샘됐다고 샘들이 이 홍러들이 홍주부들이 감리게 들이 들이 답 송구요 그러니까 답 탐지에 단 답봐 홍주부도야 남들라면 교인들이 송로에 계속 그냥 가자 랑게 됐다 동하고니 어디시버 가다 됐다 그래 근데 이게 홍주부 검대나들이 이렇게 요에 홍주 가진 그 요에 되는데 랑게 샘 랑게 샘 내록에 또를 때 곰이 돼 영감이 받잖아 근데 내록 대 등안에 맞대는 데니까 다 축구 공부도 하는데 다다다 데리기만 고요 말이야 그래서 이 홍주부 검 저거요
And so then when we engage in the various sadhanas or deity practices, for example, according to the new tantric system, there are these 4 levels of the tantras, the Kriya, Charya, Yoga, and Anuttara Yoga Tantra, the tantras. And so the previous ones, the lower tantras, gather into the higher tantra, so it becomes lesser and lesser. So the visualization stages and the mantra recitation becomes lesser and lesser as one progresses in the stages of Tantra. In terms of the mantra, for example, the first is the actual name mantra of the deity. And that gathers into the essence mantra. And that gathers into the quintessence mantra. And that gathers into Om, Ah, and Hung. And Om, Ah, and Hung is the essence of all the deities. And then once one has habituated to Om, Ah, and Hung, then the Om, Ah, and Hung gathers into Hung only. So then one can even discard of the Om and the Ah and only meditate on Hung. And that is because ultimately the body and the speech are compounded phenomena, and ultimately there is just the mind, which is represented by the Hung, or gathers into the Hung. So if you realize that, then it is sufficient to only practice the Hung. So in the various sadhanas, no matter what sadhana it is, ultimately, according to the Anuttara, or the unsurpassed highest Yoga Tantra, all of the various mantras gather into the syllable Hung. So if a person really understands that, then it is sufficient to only meditate on the Hung. So that is someone who has realized, really understood the nature of the mind, and then habituated this understanding, and then as a result has attained a state of non-distraction, always abiding within this nature. And if you always abide within the nature of the mind, then ultimately you realize the state of the Dharmakaya. And then when that is attained, then nothing else is needed. So all of that gathers in the syllable Hung. So therefore it is sufficient to only meditate on the Hung.
Yeah, but what I'm arguing actually becoming over home, you don't come. The Jolam Tamsil Hong Kong to what they were Hong Kong in the Towa Library, Zang Pardon the Divano, which are Hong you become to Towa you are. They were not Towa Library, Hong Rami, Zang Pardon, then under the Rangingo, Hong Dado, Chatan Pardon, Dawo Yomi, Simple Pagomba go Chakuri. They got to Hong to Bocom there. 지금들이 천만영 반영 거요래 만영 반의 사직은 이제 람 또다 대시 싸우 요게 시랍디 이렇게 시랍지 내가 뛰는더니 네 용뛰는 거래 랑도 주게 시랍 연구요래 개와강이 또 설령아 또 많이 봐 낭생비들이 인핑으로 이제 봐 다들 개와야 봐나 지금으로 뛰니 너무 말지 개와야 봐 대신에 들이 소박도 인핑 이자생을 들려가 있어 싸웠던 게 때문에 인핑을 로당 되면 라도 또 붙잖아요. 인도를 절대요. 맞대로가 인도를 절대. 뒤고와 차례. 다른이 예매 바래. 인핑을 로지로 나디 매바 그랬지. 이리지도 또 봐라. 강에 매바. 들이 강에는 맞다 봐. 들이 강에 같이 자도 요봐. 탕체야 매바. 인핑을 로데 다치 머리도 삼이. 담보랑 피는도 인핑을 로지들이 이마 랑을 피망이 가야 이는 핑송이 말 피망이 가야 매살 로지 디가리들이 내 고도 산족선 양도가 찌요래 디가리들이 송알지 바라들이 이게 홍주부 디전세베 바트 홍 이 대내 양들이 이렇게 들이 서로 탐지야 성진 탐지 이게 홍건 나발아 삼로 당때는 이 생비제 이게 홍주바리 생비제 특바에 베다 나바만 보여 베다 홍만 보주게 홍 자사바 홍찍을 되나 직차로래 잠속을 납자타바나 잠속을 납자타마래 잠속 찍기 대다와 하고네 이 빈티 인디시라 메바 이렇게 주바 고트바 이렇게 고로라나데 어때 뉴모고 중에 봐 하고트바 강다디 중 말이지 뉴모고 중에 뉴모고 소소라 요리 대다들이 고와요 yap고 차트들이.
And so then in terms of practice, you should still practice the Amma Hung for a short time and then continue to carry it on to your day-to-day activities. And then in your day-to-day activities, you can just think of the Hung at the navel. So it is like a pulsating sensation of pulsating Hung at the navel. It's like a flickering channel pulsating at the navel. So an actual feeling arises. So whenever there is awareness of the Hung at the navel, this pulsating awareness at the navel, then also warmth arises. So this pulsating, this flickering of the Hung at the navel is present naturally. So the sound of Hung also emerges naturally. So that is how you can visualize or you're practicing your day-to-day activities, only focusing on meditating on the pulsating Hung at the navel. And as a result of that, you develop an undistracted mind. And it is said non-distraction is the path of all the Buddhas. So when the mind is undistracted, the mind is clear and mindful. And from that, wisdom arises. And the quality of wisdom arising is that the wisdom that arises is a discriminating wisdom that can discern between virtue and non-virtue. And here, the outer level of that, of body and speech, is less important than the inner level of the mind. And that means that this wisdom mind understands that when there is altruism as the basis, then whatever one does with body and speech naturally becomes virtuous. And if at the basis there is a selfish mind, an afflicted mind, then whatever one does, it becomes non-virtuous. So then, therefore, if the basis of mind is altruistic, then even if the outer actions of body and speech appear for one's own purpose, they still actually become for the purpose of others because they are based on altruism. So this is what one then understands. And one understands then that self and others are indivisible. Because if you give rise to such an altruistic mind, then there is no self-grasping. And if there is no self-grasping, and if you only care for others, then nothing becomes a difficulty. Then it doesn't create you any difficulty to benefit others. Then you are fearless. You will not be afraid of benefiting others. And nothing will make you tired. You will never grow tired from benefiting others because you understand on the basis the preciousness of altruism. So in the beginning, when we cultivate altruism, we understand that it benefits ourselves the most. And then as we habituate to it naturally, we think of ourselves lesser until we do not think about ourselves anymore at all. And at that point, we have accomplished the true relative bodhicitta. And so in order to sustain this mind of altruism always, we practice the thought of hung, hung in the navel pulsating continuously, because then the mind sustains, maintains a stability. And then you can practice that whatever you do, whether you're staying or you're going around. The entire outer universe, all sentient beings become the hung, appear as hung. And so that is also based on understanding that the mind, the basis of mind of all beings is a single one. And although the basis is a single one, beings appear in various forms. So because the basis is one, they appear as many hungs. If you have 100 hungs, 100 hungs all gather in a single hung. Or if you have 100 waves on water, they all belong to a single ocean. They subside back into a single ocean. So in this sense, we can understand all beings appearing as many hungs. Because there is no more grasping at a duality anymore, a subject-object duality. And if there's not so much grasping at that, you will also be able to be patient with others. And for example, if others get angry, you will understand that this is only the fault of the affliction and not the fault of the person. And that I myself have this affliction also. So this is the understanding that arises from this practice.
Zibata gongdi gongdi bera taga sanghaadi, matiwa jiwa taga sotar, jiwa manyamba taga sanchok sim, parsin chok, jiwa parsin chok seni nyamniriya. Gongdi gongdi bera taga zi sanghaadi, sanghaadi jibadi sepji samji sang yadi yoba, yadi singjimbo yoba, di tongsiwe zi sanghaadi jeki yore, dewe kachi ngara chume, labu godi, chume, jeki, chume jiang samnigi, chu samte rango potak chungmano samte yore wadi, de churedi, samte di churedi, samte di shirabri, semde uni samte, 무소다다 도로지는 소차람 좋았지 대주시 봐도 시랍을 때문에 주고요. 14세 전제 자와지 핑바다 내비지 뚱이 럭치 봐도 시랍을 때문에 주고요. 시랍 때 다톡들이 시랍 때 못할 때 상제요. 얼마도 상제 가까이 요 말이지. 내가 같이 말 상제매 주무고지 주무고 상제지 대략 이요 말이지. 대탐제 말이 너나 핑바다 내비 sem진 탐제라 로봇 그게 미지 보여. septi tamchi ke dungi jos kangri chule chukare samhinjeri samhinjeri de un chuchi wan der mo cherap tamchi de samhinjeri lungale tungzi chakwaina chu samhinjeri le tungzi sana tama tungji walana de ke yi de ma zongji ba de da top top de samhinjeri de dachi bori samhinjeri de samje de chule shirab de sangjeri de yomi yo mare 로아다 다 말이 사제돼 소토 점은 사제 남는 로마로 나와리 때 말로라 대리 마도도 저게 오 취재 가까 말이 삼년제도 취해 삼년제가 대체를 취해서 대하고 거래 대하고 뭐 좀 다치 뭐 이게 남이나 농통지 라고 하고 특별히 대 양쪽은 남 노아요 말 너는 삼년제 좀 다치 뭐좀 나 신나가 삼년제를 거기고 오서는 다들 남아나 말이 그렇게 주로 특별히 다시 내려주고 땅아 용띠 말에 강시게 말에 남긴 남용도 강을 시시시요 하래
And so in the various levels of the path, in the four major lineages, the vast volumes of scriptures exist expounding the levels of the path. For example, in the Gelugpa tradition, there is the Lamrim Chenpo, the great stages of the path, and there are many scriptures on that. But then what is really the point, the essence of all of that? It is only a single point, and that is to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. All of these practices are a method to give rise to love where it has not arisen, which is the pratimoksha, to not let it decline where it has arisen, which is bodhicitta, the bodhisattva path, the 6 paramitas and so on. And then thirdly, a method to ever further increase love, and that refers to the Vajrayana, secret mantra path. And so in the context of secret mantra, then one understands basically that all sentient beings have the potential to attain enlightenment, because they all possess Buddha nature. and that is essential because some people think that I don't need any religion, I don't need any deity. But then if you ask them, but do you love your children and your husband or wife? Then of course they would say yes. And so that actually is the Dharma. That love is the Dharma. And that sustaining of love and compassion is wisdom. For example, even a small animal has wisdom to some extent. It can at least take care of its own survival. And that it does with the wisdom mind. So it is said that whatever is done in the field of knowable things is an act of the Buddha. So even the slightest beneficial activity is done with a wisdom mind, with that mind. There's no other mind than that. And only when that wisdom becomes great and accomplished, one attains enlightenment. But even before that, it is still the same mind. There is no separate mind, no separate wisdom mind than that. It only becomes fully developed when one attains enlightenment. And so that is important for those who think that I don't need any religion, I don't need the Dharma, and so on. Because the Dharma is nothing else but love and compassion. And so in brief, it is said that the only medicine for all the benefit and happiness of sentient beings is love and compassion. And that is the Dharma and nothing else. And so if you have that in this and all future lifetimes, any action that you do, even the slightest action of body and speech that comes from a mind of love, will lead to even the slightest happiness. For example, even if one is born as an animal, one is born then as an animal with a beautiful voice or a beautiful body. So that is the quality of love and compassion. And love and compassion only is the Dharma. And the wisdom mind is the Buddha and nothing else. So therefore, there is no question about whether or not there is Dharma, because it is nothing else but love. So that is something that all beings actually possess. It is only a question of developing it. So that depends on oneself. Whether one walks that path or not, that depends on oneself. But ultimately, there is no other separate Dharma. Dharma is nothing else but love and compassion, and that's important to understand. And if you only understand that, then it doesn't matter which path you follow, which practice of the four major lineages and so on you practice. Whatever you practice then will become unmistaken if you only understand that. And if you only have love and compassion, then when you die, that is all that is necessary to bring with you. So with that, my Dharma friends, thank you and Dashi Delek. I am just sharing with you some experiences. I do not have much learning or many great qualities, but I am just sharing with you from my own personal experience.